The most important tip Erhart gave before she disappeared: she should have reached another island if she did what she said she would do. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart has been one of the biggest mysteries in flying for almost 90 years. She's never heard from again. There's still no clear answer to the question of what happened to her after 87 years. A pioneering woman pilot and her friend who worked as a guide. In 1937, the Noonan went missing over the Pacific Ocean, which led to a lot of ideas and expeditions. Researchers think they've finally found the truth in 2025. After years of using new technology and looking for it non-stop, we believe that Amelia Earhart got lost and died on Nicamero, this island. The story of what happened to Earhart's Lockheed Electra plane. This is the story of how new technology, creative thought, and hard-working explorers may have finally solved the puzzle that had people fascinated for generations. One of our members were a membership group called me and said, "Hey, we have an idea about Amelia Earhart. To figure out why Earhart's absence has been a mystery for so long, we need to know who she was and what she stood for at the time." Amelia Earhart was born in Kansas in 1897. She was more than just a pilot. She was a symbol of bravery and drive during a time when women were fighting for equal rights. People all over the world were very excited when she announced in 1937 that she was going to fly around the world. At the time, this was a very big goal. It was fun. After going to an air show in 1920, Earhart became interested in flying. In 1923, she became the 16th woman in the U.S. to get her pilot's license. As a passenger, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in 1928. This was a big step forward for her. This accomplishment was important, but it didn't meet Earhart's goals. She made history in 1932 when she flew alone across the Atlantic Ocean, becoming the first woman and only the second person after Charles Lindbergh to do so. The 15-hour trip from Harbour Grace, Newfoundland to Colmar, Northern Ireland made her famous all over the world. However, Earhart wasn't happy with this achievement either. As she went on, she set more records. She was the first person to fly alone from Hawaii to California, from Los Angeles to Mexico City, and from Mexico City to Newark without stopping. She was easy to spot because of her strong personality and unique style, which included a leather jacket, short hair, and a confident smile. Besides flying, she fought for women's rights, made clothing lines, and wrote for Cosmopolitan about women going into fields that are usually controlled by men. By 1937, Earhart was 39 years old and planning her biggest trip yet, going around the world along the equator, a 29,000-mile route that had never been done before. The goal wasn't just to set a new record, it was to show that women could do things as skilled, brave, and long-lasting as men. She said it many times: women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, it should only be a challenge to other people. For many years, the details of Earhart's last trip were the best way to understand how she disappeared. In June 1937, Earhart and her pilot Fred Noonan left Miami to start their trip around the world. They had been on this trip before. The first attempt, which began in California, ended in a crash in Hawaii. This second try went east instead of west, which is the opposite way. Their modified Lockheed Electra 10E was carefully set up for the trip, with extra fuel tanks in place of seats for people. Nearly two-thirds of their trip was over by early July. They had flown from Miami to South America, across the Atlantic to Africa, and then across the Indian Ocean to Southeast Asia. The flight took off from Lae, New Guinea on July 2, 1937, and went to Howland Island, a flat piece of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that is only 1.5 miles long. A 500-mile flight over open water to a small target may have been the hardest part of their trip. To help them, the U.S. Coast Guard ship Itasca was stationed near Howland Island and could give them radio directions. What we knew from the radio was that something very bad happened. At 7:42 a.m. local time, Earhart sent a radio message that said, "We must be on you but can't see you. There is not much fuel left. We haven't been able to reach you by radio. We're 1,000 feet above the ground." The crew of the ship heard her signal but couldn't talk back and forth. At 8:43 a.m. her last known transmission arrived. "This is line 157337. This message will be sent again 6,210 times. Hold on, listen. About 6,210 rounds. We're going north and south." Then there was quiet. At the time the U.S. government began the most expensive search by sea and air in history. It looked over 250,000 square miles of ocean. They said Erhart and Noonan were lost at sea after 16 days. This is where the trail went cold for decades. The official result was clear, but it didn't make things better. While looking for Howland Island, Erhart ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific Ocean. The plane sank to the bottom of the ocean and was never seen again. The riddle of where Erhart went didn't go away over time. It might have even gotten bigger. Over the past 8 decades, many expeditions and experts have searched across the Pacific for answers, coming up with different ideas and spending millions of dollars to do so. The first searches were mostly in the water near Howland Island, which Erhart never made it to. Right after the attack, the U.S. Navy sent out aircraft carriers, battleships, and dozens of planes. They looked everywhere but couldn't find any broken pieces, a life raft, or an oil slick that could help them figure out where the Electra went down. There is another idea that Erhart and Noonan may have landed on Garner Island, which is now called Nakumuoro and is about 400 miles southeast of Howland. This idea was looked into by Tyre in the 1980s. Richard Gillespie led 13 trips by Tigard to Nakumuoro, where they found proof that was both interesting and not conclusive. A piece of aluminum airplane skin plexiglass that looks like the windows on the Electra, a woman's shoe from the 1930s, and even a jar that might have had freckle cream in it, since Erhart was known to use it. Elgin Long, an investigator and aviator, came up with a popular idea that Erhart just ran out of fuel near Howland Island and crashed into the deep ocean. In his 1999 book Amelia Erhart, The Mystery Solved, he wrote a lot about this case and did things like figure out how much fuel Erhart used and where radio transmissions happened. In 2009, the Waite Institute used deep-sea sonar to look over 2,000 square miles of ocean floor near Howland Island, but they didn't find anything solid. Robert Ballard, an oceanographer who is famous for finding the Titanic, joined the search in 2012 with his high-tech diving gear, but he also came up empty-handed. Some ideas went into areas that were more controversial. One person said that Erhart and Noonan were caught by Japanese troops after landing in the Marshall Islands, while another said that they went back to America in secret using different names. A 2017 History Channel documentary quickly sparked interest again by showing what was said to be a picture of Erhart and Noonan alive in Japanese custody. But this was quickly shown to be false when researchers found that the picture had been in a trip booked 2 years before Erhart's flight. Each trip brought new tools and techniques, but the results were always the same, promising leads that led nowhere for sure. There was no physical proof, no wreckage, and no body parts, so people could continue to guess and look. As the years went by, it looked like the secret would never be solved. There are many ideas about what happened to Erhart, but in 2010 a very strong one came forward that would later be very important to the 2024 breakthrough. Liz Smith, a former NASA worker and amateur pilot who looked at the puzzle from the point of view of a navigator, came up with this idea, which she called the deadline theory. Smith's idea was based on a simple mistake made by a person that could have had terrible results, not taking into account crossing the international dateline. During long flights, navigators like Fred Noonan used data from a sextant of the sun and the stars to figure out where they were. For these estimates, exact times and dates were needed. The international dateline made things more difficult. You lose a day when you go from west to east. It takes 1 day to cross from east to west. The flight that Erhart and Noonan took from Leyte, New Guinea to Howland Island went over this invisible line, so their estimates had to be changed. It was thought